The K-Swap 240 is back, and we are starting off with a big brake upgrade. It is great to have this car back. I am stoked to get it out on a racetrack, but before we do that, if you guys remember, last season we had an oil pressure issue, so on left-hand turns, the oil pressure was dropping tremendously to the point where we needed a solution for that. So let's raise this car up and we'll show you what we did. Here we have it, a beautiful new oil pan made by Unit 2 Fabrication. This is actually a full custom job, and we had this done last year at the end of the season, which we shot some footage for, so let's cut to that right now.
What can you tell us about this process? You've expressed some, I don't want to say reservations about it, but you said it was rather labor intensive.
Yeah, it's pretty labor intensive to just build a whole complete custom pan like that. You know, design it, fabricate it, make sure it fits and works with all our constraints in there. And we've got a steering rack that's pretty close. We still wanted to use a factory unmodified oil pump.
Right.
You know, power steering stuff's in there, so you got a relocation kit too. So there's a lot of little things that we had to make sure it fit with. But I think we got it pretty good.
And as far as the guts inside of it, all the sections and baffles and all that, you're happy with the way that's all been laid out?
Yeah, I'm very happy with how it turned out. So there's 6 compartments, 8 trap doors.
And you've obviously added some volume, some capacity compared to what we had before?
Everywhere we could add volume in, you know, a realistic way we did.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you've included a drain plug here if we go turbo.
Yep.
And these 3 guys here, we were curious about, that's actually like a bolt that passes through to bolt it up.
So the problem is when you do a pan like this and you have to bring, you know, the sump over to access those bolts to get the flange on there, it's pretty difficult.
Right.
So there's only a couple ways to do it. This is really the best way we figured out how to do it. So you just put a plug in there, you can access the bolt from the inside, and then once you get the bolt tightened up, you just put the plug back in and away you go.
Gotcha.
There are, however, a few small issues that we do have to sort out with this pan. The first one being, when it was designed, Mitch and the guys didn't incorporate the fact that when this car is in full droop, this sway bar swings forward. When it comes up, it moves backwards, thus hitting the oil pan. Thankfully, we have a solution from Siki, so we're gonna swap in that momentarily. But before that, we do need to address an issue of this oil pan leaking. So we left this car sitting for whatever it was, 6 months in the back corner, and there's a huge puddle on the ground, and one of these fittings is leaking. So we're gonna have to drain all this fresh oil and then figure out how to seal this up, I think with a little bit more silicone, and then put it all back together. Looks like maybe they just didn't use enough. Yeah, I don't think there's not enough silicone there. So we'll just let this drain and then clean it completely and then reseal it, and we should be good.
While we wait for the oil to drip out of there, we are moving on to swapping out the stock sway bar, which, as Pete explained, is contacting the pan when the suspension is compressed. And to give us more clearance, we are swapping in this Siki bar. This is designed specifically for the S14 chassis. And as you can see, when I hold them one in front of the other with the brackets in the same location, you can see how much more clearance there is at the top here, which is where we need the clearance for the pan. It's got to have, what, a good extra 3 or 4 inches there, Pete?
Yeah, I think so.
And you can also see that it's quite a bit beefier, which isn't necessarily a good thing in our case, but the good news is this is a hollow bar. So this is a 32 mil hollow bar. And we just put a quick call into Siki's tech department, and they told us that in its softest setting, it's actually very close to the same stiffness as the stock bar. And in its stiffest setting, it's about 30% stiffer. He didn't have the exact numbers for me. He's trying to dig those up, but so take that as a general guideline for stiffness. But if you want more information, give them a call, and they'll dig deeper on and give you the exact percentages. And I should also mention, it comes as a very complete kit with brand new brackets and bushings, with grease for the bushings and these adjustable end lengths, which is really nice, which means we'll be able to set these to 0 preload, as you should when putting on an aftermarket sway bar like this. So there you have it, everyone. The Siki bar is in place and looking good. We even sticker tuned it. And man, we have full fisting action here with clearance to the oil pan. So when the car's on the ground, we are still gonna have lots of clearance here. So this definitely does fix our problem. And it looks like it's gonna clear our custom lower coolant hard pipe here as well. Out back, we've pulled off the stock bar, just measured it, and it's 18 mil thick. And as we mentioned earlier, the car just had too much understeer. And no matter what I tried with the shock settings to get the car to rotate at the track, it just wouldn't do it. So we know we have like a problem that we can't overcome without making a change. And to that change, we are gone to a Super Pro rear bar. Sticky doesn't make a rear bar, so we went to our favorite supplier of other suspension goodies. And this is, as you can see, a 3-way adjustable bar. And it is a 22 mil thick bar. They also offer it in a 20 or a 24. We figured, we'll just start in the middle, and hopefully this gives us enough rear roll stiffness that we can get this car to rotate. So we're gonna set it to full stiff and see if that's giving us the rotation we want. In a lot of cases, I would recommend actually starting in the middle because it gives you adjustability either way, but we know this car had enough push in it that I'm figuring, let's just jump to straight full stiff, and I think that's probably gonna give us our answer whether going to this bar has done enough for fixing the handling balance on the car. There it is, bolted to the chassis, and as you can see, we have the end links in place here, but we haven't set preload yet, so we'll show you how to do that in a minute. But I really like these end links actually. It's quite a clever design. Typically an adjustable end link would use like a turnbuckle style one with spherical bearings in them, and they're quite expensive, but this is a really clever way to offer an adjustable end link, and I think what is more likely a more affordable package. Welcome to my boudoir under here, everyone, and I'm just checking preload on the end link here. What you want to do is be able to pass the bolt through into the sway bar without any kind of resistance. So you want there to be like no load happening, so you don't want to have to like force it in or see it, you know. So when you line this up with the hole in the sway bar, you want it to be truly lined up perfectly so that this just slides through there easily. I can see on the stiffest setting, we're actually in the perfect, we have this in the perfect length for the bolt to pass right through. But if I go to the middle one, I would have to shorten the end length by about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch to get the hole to line up perfectly. So you'll see that I'll be able to pass this through the stiffest setting like super easy. So up front we have a ton of adjustability with these turnbuckle style end links on the sticky sway bar, and we've jacked the both corners up into what would be like normal ride height position so that we can set our preload. And the nice thing about this is we can just turn the turnbuckle and see if we get any binding up in this location here. So I can kind of like center it where I can see it doesn't have any tension on the sway bar. So I don't even need to do it with the passing the stud through the sway bar method. I can just kind of like center it with the turnbuckle, which is quite nice, and then can lock the turnbuckle down in the middle here, and we should have 0 preload, and do the same on the other side, and I think we're good to go.
I forgot how rusty this car is in some spots, so without further ado, I got my favorite hot sauce, as DP likes to call it, the fluid film rust protection, and I am just gonna nuke this area right here. That's just awful. Try to protect it and lock in and trap some of this rust from getting worse. This car actually has not seen, I think, God, it's probably been 5 years of no winters. But prior to that, it was on the road constantly, and somebody drove it and it was pretty rusty. So you could see there's a lot of undercoat on this thing, which has helped. But I've replaced the subframe on this car and a fuel lines. So there's been some work, but for the most part at this point, it's all just about prevention. So I'm just gonna keep spraying here. Well, I figured out how to clean this bolt here, and that is with the use of a Dremel and this bristle plastic wheel. Well, what's left of it, it's kind of been reduced very quickly, but as you can see, the threads are clean, and this area right underneath it where there was a lot of silicone is cleaned up nicely. Admittedly, I did try the wire wheel, and as you can see, it was too abrasive. I said, no way, I don't want to go there. So the next step is to put on some of this Right Stuff Permatex gasket maker, and the reason I'm using this is like a 1-minute dry time. So once I get it up there, I'm going to spray a bunch of brake clean in there, get it up there, and then this will set very quickly, so it's not going to give it a chance, the oil a chance to like leak through it. All right, this is nice and clean right now. I'm pretty confident that we're not going to have any type of leakage after this. There we go. I'm just going to wipe this off here. As you can see, we've got just a little bit of silicone coming out excessively, and that's it. So I'm going to torque this down. We're done.
For those of you who watched the last track test video on this car, you may recall that we also had a brake problem with the car, and since we're trying to fix everything with it before we go back to the track, we thought, why not address the brakes? Just to refresh your memory, this is an Evo caliper setup on the front, and I think it's like a, what is that, 32 in the rear, Pete? Is that
yes.
Right? Z32 in the rear, And actually Tom from Core4 Motorsports, I think he's in the New York State area, reached out to us and said, hey guys, I think I have a solution for your S14 that you're really gonna like. He developed this kit for his own S14 race car that he competes in the American Endurance Racing Series with. He has something like 4,000 laps of R&D into this kit, which shows you how hardcore he is and how serious he is about getting this kit really dialed in. And we thought, you know, who's better to help us with this than someone who's done that much laps in this chassis. So this is his hardcore front and rear big brake kit. And I think maybe the most important thing to point out right off the bat is that this is a very high performance brake kit for basically half the cost of a typical big brake kit. So you get the front and rear kit for what is the typical cost of just a front big brake kit from a name brand. So incredible value, and it uses a lot of high quality components. The front calipers are 6-piston Wilwood forged superlight calipers. This is their newest and stiffest caliper in that series, and it should give you the absolute best performance given that it is so stiff. And one of the nice things about both the front and the rear calipers, you can see it uses a 4-piston forged superlight in the rear, is that it uses an incredibly common brake pad size. So we've gone with these Hawk HB521 part number with a DTC 70 in the front and a DTC 60 in the rear. Tom did recommend staggering the pad front to rear for best brake balance or brake bias if you prefer. And this pad shape is used by AP and StopTech and a bunch of other brands so that it's incredibly common and it's available in like a hugely wide variety of brands and compounds. And it's also, because it's so popular, these tend to be very affordable. So easy to get pads and they're relatively cheap to get. And as for the rotors, man, we have gone big on the fronts, haven't we, Pete?
I'd say.
There's actually 3 flavors you can get with the front rotors. You can either get, the kit will work with a 350Z front rotor from the track model, and that's obviously your most affordable option. But it's a one-piece rotor, it's relatively heavy, and it's not as efficient as this big boy. There's also a 332 mil 2-piece with an aluminum center hat like this, which reduces, I believe, 6 pounds of weight versus the 350Z rotor. And it's also a floating design, so it gives you a lot of performance benefits. It also, evacuates air more efficiently, being a high performance rotor, more thermal mass, so it'll both take more heat and shed more heat out. And he's offering it now in this gigantic, I think 355 mil diameter, which is huge. I think we're kind of a beta tester for him on this. I know he's run this size on his personal race car, but we might be the first guys in the wild to be testing this size. So we'll see if we have any issues. He's confident it'll clear under an 18-inch wheel like we're running on the car. So massive calipers and rotors, so we're not gonna have any overheating issues. And I think most importantly, we're gonna get some balance, some bias back in the system. By the way, he does recommend using this whole kit with a Z32 master cylinder. So I believe that's what's in the car now, Pete?
It is, yep.
And you went to, I think, a smaller booster at one point?
We did. I think it's a B14 Sentra booster.
Right. Was that clearance purposes for the K-Swap?
No, that was just for pedal feel because we had an automatic booster before there, and I found it was like too spongy and there was too much assist.
For the sake of science, we've got out our highly scientific hook scale here. We figured we'd weigh some components.
It's as good as she gets.
Really just out of our own curiosity. This isn't a common setup on an S14. This is an Evo 8 caliper and a 2-piece Evo 8 rotor from DBA. So this isn't really gonna give you, the typical weights that you'd be pulling off this car. But in any case, we were curious to see how much weight we might be saving, if at all. By the way, it's worth noting how thick the pads are that come in this Wilwood caliper. They're incredibly thick. So these are gonna last a very long time. It's like an endurance pad thickness you've got on there. And in terms of pad area, I think it's very comparable to the Evo 8. So this guy is 12 pounds. Woo! 8 pounds. That's 4 pounds lighter? It does feel 4 pounds lighter. Wow. That's a lot of weight to save. And as far as rotors go, I mean, this is a much bigger. I know this is a 355. I don't know if you know offhand how big this is, Pete, but I think it's maybe like
I want to hazard it's in the 330.
Yeah,
320 range. Area, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see how much it weighs. Got 19 pounds on the nose, 20 pounds on the nose. So a 1 pound difference. So yes, it is slightly heavier, but your typical OE rotor in this size would be a lot heavier than this 2-piece one. So I would say anytime you compare this to an OE rotor, you're gonna be saving weight. And to gain that much size and thermal mass to only gain a pound, I think is a trade-off well worth making if you're putting a lot of heat into your braking system.
Yeah, and overall, that system is lighter, right?
It's 3 pounds
with the lighter
overall.
caliper.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Step one in fitting up the front kit is bolting up their adapter bracket, which bolts to the factory spots on the hub here. And this is built of a very strong special aluminum. I think it's, gosh, what's the specification on it? It's not your typical like T6061. It's like a 2024-T351 for you engineers out there. Anyway, it's very strong and fatigue resistant, so you'll never have a failure at the bracket. And Tom recommends torquing it to factory specs with a dab of blue Loctite, which we've done. And you'll also notice that there's a ring that we put on here. It's like a little hub adapter ring, which you can see fits onto the chamfered backside of the aluminum center hat here. And that's designed to give you perfect hub centricity, or concentric fit up here on the rotor. So as you can see, we have an arrow on the caliper here, which orients the same direction as the arrow on the rotor. So we know we've got the correct caliper on the side of the car. And I'm just going to torque the supplied hardware here to 35 to 37 foot-pounds as Tom from Core4 specifies for it, with a dab of blue Loctite. And then we can admire just how good these brakes look, DP, because I am in awe of the girth, the circumference. It's just absolutely amazing. Look at that. There's actually tons of clearance in there, and I guess that shouldn't be a surprise in terms of the caliper, because this is actually a more compact caliper than those Evo 8 ones. And I mean, the large diameter rotors fit under there like a dream.
Oh, looks so good too.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Woo, she's pretty. We should mention that the kit also came with brake lines, which we fitted up. So I think it's time to move out back. Out back, you can see that Pete's already pulled off the old Z32 stuff, which has seen better days. And what's pretty remarkable about this Core4 kit is what Tom has done is actually included the integration of the emergency brake in the rear that uses a drum system. So he's actually had these aluminum center hats machined with the drum integrated into it, which from a a racing big brake kit perspective, I don't think I've ever seen this done before. Typically, when you put a big brake kit on the rear of a car, you lose the e-brake, which is, fine if it's a race car, but not so great if it's a street car. And this is still a street car. I know Pete wants to drive this on the street sometimes, and not having e-brake, it's just generally a pain in the butt, isn't it? Like, even if you're putting it on the trailer and you want to like lock it in position, having an e-brake is just really handy. So this is pretty amazing to see, and obviously we're stepping up to a much larger rotor. As you can see, it's got more thermal mass, it's going to cool better, and we've got the advantage of having a much larger swept area of the brake pad and that 4-piston forged Superlite Willwood caliper, which, as I mentioned before, uses the exact same pad size and shape as the front. We've just stepped down from the DT70 to a DTC60 in the rear for brake balance. So let's fit these up, but before we do that, we're going to do a little more science, because why not? We've got our little fish scale out here. This Core4 rotor is 11.9 pounds, let's call it 12 pounds, and it's heavier, 14 pounds, 2 pounds heavier, even though it's smaller. So there you go, save 2 pounds right there, loaded with the pads and everything. So we've got same against same, that's 7.5 pounds, 4.6 pounds here. So this is lighter, obviously, because it's a single piston caliper, but it's only
dual, but
oh, sorry, dual. This is 4, right? So we've got, this was 7.5 to 4.5 clots, so 3 pounds there, but then this was 2 pounds lighter. So this is 1 pound heavier, despite the fact that we've gone up massively in size. So pretty impressive overall, I would say. Man, does that ever look good? It's looking like a proper race car now, but a race car with a functioning e-brake. So that's a lot of win happening there. And gotta say, I'm super impressed with the attention to detail on this Core4 Motorsports kit. All the packaging is carefully labeled, so you know where everything goes. He sent us a very detailed description of how everything should go together. And I mean, it's brakes, it's not rocket science, but he was very thorough in the way he put the kit together, and really excited to see this, go get a proper shakedown at the racetrack. But before we do that, we actually have a couple of power upgrades planned for it. I know we talked about boost pressure before, but we may be going down a different path. So stay tuned for the next episode on that. Then there'll be a dyno tuning episode, then there'll be a racetrack episode. So lots more K-Swap S14 coming at you soon. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe and hit the like button for lots more K-Swap S14. Did you adjust these when you're putting them in?
I didn't know.
Well, they were set to the perfect length for the stiffest setting. So I guess that was destiny. It was like Super Pro was telling us, you guys got to go to the full stiff setting, because this one just slides right in there too. So